everyone, and welcome back. Today's video is a case that I've wanted to cover for a very long time, but every time that I recorded it, it was really short, and I just needed to do more research to make it a longer case because I felt like it deserved more of my time. It's a case that has stuck with me for many years, and I think if you live in Europe, you will most likely have heard of this case. I don't know how far in the world it reached, but today I'm going to be talking about the case of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. So Holly and Jessica were 10 years old when they went missing on August 4th of 2002 in a town called Soham in the United Kingdom. I know that this happened in 2002, and I'll tell you later why I remember this happened in that year, but it took me a little while to realize that that is now 17 years ago. I can't believe it's that long ago because I remember this case so vividly. So the two girls went to school together and they were best friends, like they were inseparable. Wherever you saw Holly, you saw Jessica and vice versa. Jessica had just come back from vacation and she had bought Holly a present and she couldn't wait to give it to her. So on the day of August 4th, they met up. Jessica went over to Holly's house and they lived pretty close to each other. Again, something like maybe half a mile away or something. So they would always walk over to each other's house. So she walked over to Holly's house, gave her present. It was a necklace that had an H on it and two dolphins. And Jessica loved it. She immediately wore it, and the two spent the entire afternoon together at Holly's house. Holly loved it and the necklace, yeah. And they spent the entire day together at Holly's house. So in like the evening time, late afternoon evening, Holly's family were actually hosting a barbecue at their house, I believe for just like family. But Jessica was of course invited to stay, and in the meantime, they had both changed into their Manchester United jerseys with Beckham's name on the back because they were both huge Manchester United supporters. Holly's mom took a picture of them, and that is the most famous picture. In this case, it's the one I showed in the beginning of the video. It was used for all their missing posters, and I actually have that jersey. I'm wearing it today in honor of them. So the reason that I know this took place in 2002 is because in 2002, actually later that month in August, I went to Manchester and I visited the Manchester United Stadium because I'm a huge Manchester United supporter, and I bought this jersey. It also has number 7 on the back, which is Beckham's number, but I put my own name on there because that was actually the summer that Beckham left for another club, and I didn't want to get his name, which I kind of regret now because, he's a legend. But it's very eerie because it's such a well-known case. I was 19 at the time, and I came back to Belgium with this jersey, and my mom was like, "Why did you buy that? That's a cursed jersey." And I was like, "No, the jersey has nothing to do with it." But even at 19, she was like afraid for my safety because of what happened. Like it was crazy. It was like such a well-known case. So around 6 p.m. that night, the girls decide to go out for a walk. Now, in Soham, nothing really ever happened. It was considered a very safe place to live. And the parents at first, they didn't know they were gone. So I'll get into that. I'm just going to tell you how I wrote it down because otherwise I'm going to get confused. But CCTV footage, so security footage, shows the girls crossing the car park of the Ross Pierce Sports Center in Soham upstairs in their bedroom. But other guests had said, it's very quiet. We haven't heard them in a while. Maybe we should go check on them. And that's when they discovered the girls are missing. So they hadn't told their parents they were going for a walk at all. Holly's father and her brother go out searching for the girls, but can't find them anywhere. And then they call Jessica's parents to see if maybe they had gone over to their house, but they also weren't there. Jessica actually had a mobile phone, which for a 10-year-old in 2002 was actually quite a big thing because mobile phones weren't that big yet in 2002. But her parents gave it to her so they could always reach her when she wasn't home. So her mom called it, but it was switched off. It went straight to voicemail. So around 10 p.m., the girls are officially reported missing, and by 10:30 p.m., the house is crawling with police officers. Because the girls wore the Manchester United jersey, they were very easily remembered by people. They looked really cute because they had matching outfits, so a lot of people remembered seeing them. There were a lot of sightings reported. Everyone said that the girls just looked very happy. It didn't look like they were going anywhere in particular. They were just wandering around, walking up and down the streets, and nobody saw anything bad happen to them. The last confirmed sighting of the girls was at 6:30 p.m. when a member of the public who knew Holly and Jessica well saw them walking along Sand Street. So it soon became one of the largest police investigations in UK history. At first, police didn't suspect foul play because they had no reason to. They just thought the girls wandered off somewhere. And they were genuinely just looking for the girls. But it soon became clear that that wasn't the case. So police then set up an investigation hub. So the investigation hub was meant to be a central point where people could share leads and tips and witnesses could come forward. But police actually had more of a motive in mind, that they wanted to keep an eye on anyone who was overly involved in the investigation, who showed a little too much interest in the case. Now, a lot of leads and witnesses came in, and police started investigating. There were reports made by a few people of a rusty old white van driving around in the area, but they tracked it down and the owner, and it didn't lead to anything. Reports also came in of a man driving around in a car with two girls and driving kind of dangerous, like going really fast and then going slow and taking really fast corners. But again, police looked into it and it turned to nothing. All the leads they got are eventually dead ends. 2 days after their disappearance, it emerges that a jogger had contacted police to report teenagers screaming in the area of Warren Hill near Newmarket in Suffolk. Suffolk is actually a decent, it's about, I think it's 20 kilometers away or something. It's a decent bit away from the town. The same jogger actually a week later reported to police that he discovered 2 mounds of earth in the same area, but those mounds ended up having nothing to do with Holly and Jessica. On that same day, August 6th, David Beckham also released an appeal for the girls' safe return. On August 15th, so 11 days after their disappearance, Sky News decided to come into town and do a reenactment of the disappearance. They go around and they interview witnesses who had already come forward. And one of those witnesses was that last witness to see them, a man called Ian Huntley. He admitted to being probably the last person to see them alive, and he saw the girls walking past his house. He said that he was out by the front porch, or the front yard of his house, and he was giving his dog a bath. The girls stopped and had a chat with him. ex-girlfriend was a woman called Maxine Carr, who was the girl's favorite teaching assistant at school, so they knew Ian, and they asked him some questions about Miss Carr. Ian himself was a caretaker at the local college, and his house was actually on the college grounds. He had that job since November 2001, despite having a very long criminal history of sexual assault with minors. So, Ian was always that guy who was interested in younger girls. When he was 18, he would date like 13 or 14-year-olds. During the 90s, he had multiple relationships with underage girls. He even married an 18-year-old girl, but after a few days, she left him for his younger brother. And he never really got back on his feet after that. He couldn't hold on to a job. He couldn't hold on to a place to live. Like, he was kind of floating from place to place. Again, having multiple relationships with underage girls. And then in 2001, he meets 22-year-old Maxine Carr in a nightclub. And after only 4 weeks, they move in together. Maxine describes the relationship as being a very fast relationship. She said that he was very controlling and abusive, and that he was a very angry man. And a lot of his ex-girlfriends have said the same thing, that he was very controlling and abusive. The reason that he actually ended up getting the job is because he didn't actually have a record. So police didn't find out until much, much later, until after this case basically, that he even had all these encounters with the law. But nothing ever stuck because they never had enough evidence to convict him of anything. So Maxine was the girl's absolute favorite teaching assistant, and they just loved her. And they were very sad to learn that she wouldn't be returning the next school year. So they stopped at Ian's house and asked him some questions about her, like, how is she doing, and does she have a new job yet? And he said that after that they walked on back towards the sports center and just went on their way. Since he was the last person to see them, police did look into him. They, did some investigating into him. They searched his house kind of quickly and didn't find anything, so they let him go. But Ian was always the first person to give interviews to journalists. He was one of those people that police were looking for with this investigation hub to find who was like overly involved, and he was overly involved. Police also thought it was weird that he always got really emotional when he talked about them because he barely knew the girls. And some journalists thought this too. Some of them went to police and said, "Hey, we're interviewing this guy and he's really weird." And police agreed. So police interviewed both Ian and Maxine, but Maxine gave Ian an alibi for the time that the girls went missing. She said that she was upstairs in the bath and she heard the girls downstairs talking to him, and she confirmed that after that they went on their way and she didn't see them again. But police found out that Maxine was actually not in Soham at all that day. She was in a different city visiting her mom. So police then decide to separate the two and interview them separately, and they also do a thorough search of their house again and the college grounds. On the college grounds, they find the shredded and partially burned clothes of the girls. All of their clothes, including the unmistakable Manchester United jerseys. They found them in a bin in a building, and the key to that building was in Ian's house. They also found Ian's fingerprints all over the bin, and they found some of Ian's hairs on the clothing. So on August 17th, Ian and Maxine are both arrested on suspicion of murder. Later that day, the girls' bodies were actually also found near an airbase in Mildenhall in Suffolk. So this is interesting, right? Because it was determined later on that they were killed somewhere else and their bodies were dumped there. But that jogger remembers hearing screams in Suffolk, so it's a little bit strange that that was also the area they ended up being found. If they weren't actually killed there, that could just be a strange coincidence, though. They were found by a gamekeeper who noticed a really foul smell in the area. But it was 13 days after they disappeared, and the bodies were really badly decomposed. So it appeared that Ian had tried to burn the bodies after they were already dead to hide the evidence, but it didn't work. So the bodies were badly decomposed and really badly damaged from the fire. So it took a full week for police to confirm the identity of that being Holly and Jessica. And an autopsy then revealed that their cause of death was asphyxiation. Ian was charged with 2 counts of murder, and Maxine was charged with obstruction because she provided a false alibi. However, a year later, she was also charged with 2 counts of aiding an offender. In court, Ian admitted to manslaughter but not to murder. He said that it was all just one big accident. He said that the girls walked past his house and that Holly got a nosebleed. And so he asked them both to come in to tend to Holly's nosebleed, and that Holly was sitting on the side of the bathtub, which happened to be full, and that she slipped and drowned, and that Jessica started screaming, and he tried to calm her down by putting his hand over her mouth, and he accidentally ended up suffocating her. I mean, Holly was 10 years old. Unless she banged her head and fell unconscious, maybe. But I don't think a 10-year-old girl just drowns in a bathtub, not to mention the fact that Jessica was there. If she had banged her head, she would have pulled her out. And I can even somehow believe that maybe one of them died accidentally, but not both. That's just not... I don't believe that. And police, the prosecution said that he went to way too much trouble to cover this up for this to be an accident. He was eventually sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 40 years. They would have given him a permanent life in prison sentence if he had also sexually assaulted them, and everyone believed that he did because his bed sheets were washed immediately after they disappeared, which is super suspicious. But because the bodies were so badly decomposed, they couldn't prove it. There was no evidence of it to be found, so he got a possibility of release after 40 years. But he could spend his life in prison, we don't know. Maxine was found guilty of obstruction because of the false alibi, but she was not found guilty of aiding an offender, and this is interesting. She was really vilified by the media and by the public. When I was following this, she was made to seem worse than him. Her name was in the papers everywhere, and Ian was usually just mentioned because she was the girls' favorite teaching aide, and they loved her, and she took advantage of that relationship by luring them in and killing them. And this is what I genuinely believed, that she killed them along with him. It wasn't until I started researching this case that I realized she actually had nothing to do with it, and she was treated quite unfairly. The only thing that she's guilty of is providing a false alibi, and yes, you shouldn't, but I can understand it. It was her boyfriend. She loved him. He apparently called her when she was at her mother's house and said, I'm the last person to see them alive. This is going to look bad. Police is going to think I did something to them. And she truly believed he was innocent, so she thought she was helping him by providing this alibi. And I don't know if I would do it differently. I mean, I know that you can't provide a false alibi, But I can understand that you love someone so much and believe that they are not that kind of person, and you don't want them to get convicted of something they didn't do. So she provided him the alibi because she believed he was innocent. Some people think she knew what he did, but the court didn't believe that because they believed her version of the story and only convicted her of providing the false alibi, so obstruction. And she was sentenced to 21 months in prison, but she actually only served about 5 because she had already spent 16 months in prison before. Like, it took a year and a half for these court proceedings to actually start. She was actually granted a lifelong injunction where she was given a completely new identity and no one will ever know who she is. Only 4 people in the UK have ever been provided that. If you've ever heard of the James Bulger case where 2 teenage boys killed a 3-year-old boy, they were actually given that as well when they were released from juvenile prison. I don't know if I agree with that, because from what I've heard, they haven't exactly bettered their lives, and that was just a brutal killing, which they actually did. I understand why they gave it to her. She wasn't responsible for their deaths, even though everyone in the public believes she was. So she's married now with a child, but even her child will never know who she was because it's completely sealed. Nobody knows her new identity and knows that that's her. I guess unless you recognize her photo. But I couldn't find anything about who she is today, so I think that it's pretty well hidden. Some people argue, well, they could have caught him a lot sooner. I agree, but they wouldn't have saved the girls' lives. If he had held them for a few days and then killed them, I would have been like, yeah, her false alibi caused their deaths. But that's not the case. They would have arrested him sooner, but the girls would have been dead anyway. So I feel a little sorry for her, to be honest. I agree that what she did was wrong, but she genuinely believed that he hadn't done it and she was not involved in it whatsoever. And that was proven. Her alibi was proven that she was nowhere near Soham at the time that this happened. So, that is it. That is it for this case. I'm happy that I got to tell their story because it, like I said, it always stuck with me. And as always, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you soon.